Hello and welcome back to the Basic Bee podcast. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, as well as my friend Meridith McCarty. We're going to be talking about how to actually cross things off our to-do list and even how to boost productivity by seeking support. I know. Hold on to your party hats for that one, because that's a big one that I have been learning and am still learning. Before I bring her on, here is a quick intro. Meridith, founder of Time Freedom Co., is a growth strategist empowering service business owners to build scalable businesses without sacrificing their personal life. With over 6 years of experience growing 6- and 7-figure service businesses, she's mastered the harmony between career success and family time. As a mother of 3 young children, Meridith runs her business in just 3 focused days a week. Her journey from overwhelmed business owner to freedom-focused entrepreneur has equipped her with insights on strategic efficiency and intentional business design. Meridith's mission is to help others redefine success, proving it's possible to have both a prosperous business and time to enjoy life. Meridith, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having me. Even that intro just gets me so excited. I just love it.
It's my favorite thing to do, the intro part, because people are like, oh my gosh, I sound kind of awesome.
I'm so great. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, I kind of love that. I should do that just to start my day.
I was just thinking that, yeah, just like, how do you start your day? Oh, I listened to my intro from this podcast.
Yeah, I love it.
So I'm curious because we connected on Threads and then I jumped
Yeah.
in your community and on your email list and I was like, Meridith, please come join me on the podcast. So how did you even get started with time management, productivity, any of this stuff?
Yeah, I have such a weird story. So in 2018, my husband was moving us all over the country for his career. So it was like we were moving up and down the East Coast and I was doing the traditional 9 to 5, but I was having to leave and quit every year that we moved. And so I never was growing in my own career. And I always knew I wanted to be my own boss, but I didn't really even know what that meant or what it looked like. And it was not really something that I even put thought into. And then in 2018, we made a move to Rhode Island. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work for myself. I'm just going to figure it out. And so I actually found becoming a virtual assistant. And I was like, this isn't real. Like I had no experience in the online world. So I was like, this is a scam. Like this can't be real. People make money doing this, whatever. So I just kept researching and teaching myself. And I'm like, I could do admin, So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. So I did that. And I actually grew a virtual assistant agency. We grew extremely quickly. I had no idea that there were so many people out there that needed virtual assistants and then also wanted some. So we grew very quickly. COVID also propelled our growth because everybody needed to figure out how to work online. So we ended up growing that way. But then after I started having my little babies, it was becoming apparent just my priorities, my time, everything shifted in how much I had to give to the business and to be able to be home. And that was my first priority. So I ended up being more of not the day-to-day person, but I ended up consulting my clients on operations, productivity, efficiency, systems, all the stuff that I loved. And so that's kind of how I have gotten here. Is I was actually doing the work with clients and then am now teaching people how to be more efficient and all that.
I love it. And I feel like it seems like when people become parents that it's like, all right, I have a finite amount of time. I really have to make it count. And it seems like that really kicks people in the tush.
I said on another podcast interview that I did that moms have the best time management and we're always like, we never have enough time. And we tell ourselves all of these things that we're bad at, but no, we are the best at time. We know we have very little time to do certain things. It helps really figure out what our priorities quickly. And so it changes everything.
Yeah. And I find it also very interesting. Another friend that I had on the podcast, Sarah Light, we talked about time management and productivity as well. And it was more about the lens of SEO and organizing all of those things.
Yeah.
And she's also a mom of many, many children. I can't remember if it's 4 or 5, but there's a lot of kids in her house too. So it's you have to be just so intentional with every second that you have.
Yeah. It just makes life easier, honestly.
Yeah. So let's talk about to-do lists because I have a few of those. I feel like it's constantly evolving. And what I try to do, I don't know, I'll sacrifice myself just so we can learn.
Case study, come on.
So I have a brain dump that I try to do at least weekly. It doesn't always happen, but I've tried to be more habitual about that. And I've even found it good to do stuff for the next day of okay, these things are still living in my head. Let me get it out of my head. Not perfect with it, but I'm finding that's helping. But I still have this ever growing to-do list. And I do find that things get knocked off, but not everything. So then I also find myself with the like mental chatter of, you didn't do enough. What are you thinking?
Yes.
So I don't know. Go from
Right.
there.
That is so common. You are not alone. That happens all the time. And you saying that you don't complete everything, correct. You never will. That's the downside of having a to-do list, right?
Mhm.
We take one thing off, but we add 3 more things. So what I tell clients to do instead of a to-do list, so your brain dump, we want to do that weekly. However much you need to do it, I say to do it because we need to get everything out of your head, especially if you're a mom and you're running a business and you have all these other things, even if you're not a mom, whatever you have going on in your life, we don't know the mental load that we are carrying. I did a post just about this. It was like you sit down to do work and then it's like, wait, did I turn that form in for school? What are we going to do for dinner? Right? Like the mental load, even when you have a super supportive partner, the mental load is still there, right? So having the brain dump to get all of that out of your head is step one, perfect. The second step, and where you might be kind of veering into something we can improve on, is using that brain dump as your to-do list. So that is what the brain dump, then you're working off of, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. So what I suggest is actually just doing what I call the rule of 3, where you pick the top 3 priorities that you want to get done that day, and that's it. So instead of working from one big list, we're actually intentionally picking those 3 most important things out and then accomplishing those each day. So it helps you define what is priority and also asking yourself the question of, if this only got done today, it would feel like a productive day in doing those 3 things. And it's funny because a lot of people I know are probably yelling, listening to this, like, okay, 3 things, cool. I have way more than 3 things that need to get done, and that's totally fine. That's the point, because once you learn to get the 3 most important things done, then you can get the 4th thing done and the 5th thing done, right? But it's all about doing it in a very specific order that will actually propel you forward and not just give you those dopamine hits of the things that don't matter, but you want to get that check off your list.
Right. You want to actually like mark it through. I know you have this worksheet and I can picture it in my mind, but I think it's in your free community. And I dove into some things and then I haven't had a chance to dive into
Yeah.
everything that I want to. And I saw the rule of 3 and I am really excited to go like explore more. But I do
Yeah.
remember seeing the rule of 3. I was definitely skeptical. I was like, all right, let me like give this a shot. So in the planner that I have been doing the 3 things at the top. And so the 4th thing I do add in there is like workout or like somatic exercises for me because it's really helpful. But
Yes.
we're on Wednesday, but I've had a really good week where I'm like, I've been doing this over the last few months, but I feel like I've finally locked in and it's like actually cranking and working. And like, here we are. It's 2:15 in the afternoon for me right now. This is the last
Mhm.
thing I technically have to do. Like my goal is to actually be done with work like 3:30, 4 o'clock every day. So I'm like, this is totally doable.
Yeah, because you go into the day with a different mindset, right? Instead of like, how many things can I check off my list, where probably a lot of it doesn't matter, versus I am going to do the most impactful things for my life or my business. Because I say to do it all for one, you are one being in work and in your life. So you should be doing priorities based off of that. But just even the mentality switch of you starting your day, right, is totally different. And then you get momentum. So, yeah, the rule of 3 is what I teach.
I love it. I could totally imagine people being like, well, how do I choose the 3? So is there
Yeah.
like some way to filter that down to really help someone know what to prioritize? Because I know that's one spot that I was spinning as well. Okay, you get it. You know SEO is important, but no, you're not interested in learning another skill. Who has the time? But who are you supposed to trust with the task of getting SEO to work for you? Someone who won't ghost you mid-project or treat you like a dum-dum lollipop. Someone who actually wants to empower you and your team with all things SEO. Hi, yes, it's me, Brittany, and you are the person I created the SEO packet for. You're curious, you want to understand this thing better, but like only a little bit. You don't actually want to do the doing. This way, you get the key SEO stuff super fast and you get support throughout and beyond the project. No more letting Google gift you the wrong SEO strategy. Time to put the right words in the right places and get found online by the right people. Find all the info you need below.
Yeah. And so I always think about personal life first. And that's because in general, I don't like my personal life to get squeezed out by work. So I look personally, what are some priorities there? And then for work, I typically ask myself, is this going to make money? Right? Like, is this going to make money? Is it going to help me make money? Is it serving clients, which is technically you are getting paid to do that, but it also can be marketing. So ask yourself the question, is this moving my business forward? And that typically will say like yes or no. If it's like tweaking graphics in Canva, that's probably not a priority, right? Like that could be number 4 or 5 that you get to. But to me, it's like reaching out to prospects or checking in with clients, like those things that you're like, yeah, those are tangible things that are going to make me money because we're all in business to make money.
Yeah.
Like we're here to serve people. That's great. Like I totally understand that. I love serving my audience and all of that, but also we want to get paid, right? We want to make money in our business. And so typically think around that of how that's going to affect pushing your business forward.
That is really helpful. So one thing that's really helped me is like I started to just notice what my brain was doing throughout the day. And I used to feel like I had to do everything in the morning. I had to do my workout in the morning. I had to like meditate or do visualization or any of that kind of like more chill stuff. And I have found these like different little permission slips for myself over the last few months of like, I actually heard a bit of advice that it's better as a woman for your body and your cycle of how you are as a being to do a workout later in the day. And I was like, all right, let me play around with that. It acts as a barrier, almost like a door or something, a boundary of like, all right, when I do my workout, I'm done with work.
Transition.
There we go. There is a word
for your
it.
transition task. Yeah, it's true. I have never been a morning person in general. Even after kids, I still am not up at 6 a.m. I am definitely not a morning workout person. I've always worked out later in the day. But that's why I tell people, because once you kind of get your rule of 3 and you start time blocking those rule of 3. So once you figure out like these are the top 3 priorities I want to do, you can look at your schedule for the next day. I typically do it like a night ahead so that you can like crank out work immediately when you sit down at your computer, not like, okay, what am I going to do today? Because you're already wasting time. But I've been there, I get it. Time blocking based on your energy levels, which is what you're talking about, right? Like if you know I'm sluggish in the morning, I'm not going to be doing my most creative work in the morning, then you aren't going to put your record your reels priority in your morning slump. So then you just kind of learn how and when you're most productive and don't fight against that just because somebody might say, I see it all the time from the productivity bros, wake up for an uninterrupted work time from 5 to 9. And you're like, okay, cool. Never going to happen because that doesn't work for us women that have children, so it's, you got to figure out what works for you and work off your energy.
Yeah, that is so helpful. So, okay, couple of things. Words of advice for someone who's like going to give this a try and then they're absolutely going to hit that hiccup moment of like, I didn't do the thing, I didn't cross it off, I like put too much on my list, like whatever the thing is, or they feel like they haven't maybe matched their day to their energy levels, like help.
Yeah. So I typically tell clients to try like craft their perfect ideal week that they would like to spend their time at, and then try it for 2 weeks. And you will notice things like, oh, I scheduled for myself to do the creative in the morning and that didn't work. So then you're tweaking. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Because a lot of times perfectionists, it'll be all or nothing. So it's like, I had a really good day, I had a bad day, so now it's never going to work for me and I'm not doing this anymore. You have to be flexible. Life is flexible. You get a call from your kid's school saying they're sick. So you have to learn to go with the flow, accept that things are different. And that's also why we plan, is because it's a lot easier to be flexible when you plan. So a lot of people there are reactive, in reactive roles especially, are like, well, I can't plan because somebody tells me what to do. But it's much easier to plan and to shift when things happen when you have a plan set in place for those 3% chance times that come up. But a lot of it is your mindset and just accepting that you don't need to be a perfectionist. Things are going to happen. You might have something on your calendar that tells you should do XYZ and you really just want to take a nap, and you can take a nap and you can move it to another day, right? Like accepting it and letting it go. Progress over perfection every time.
Yeah, that's huge as someone who has perfectionist tendencies to hear. And I literally just said this in the last podcast too about being a perfectionist. It's a theme that seems to follow me around.
Perfectionist, overachieving.
Yeah.
You will have the voice. You just say, thanks, voice. I am not going to listen to you right now. And I'm going to do this, right?
Go have a snack.
Right. You get better at it. Just kind of maybe you go take a workout and you come back. There's just things that you can implement that will help.
Yeah. So I do SEO copywriting and a lot to do
Yeah.
with like, if we just take a blog, for example, one thing I tell people to do is outline the blog and then you can fill it in. It seems very similar. I have not thought about this until like right now as you were talking. Like your plan is your outline. So it gives you something to work from, but then you're going to be
Right.
flexible with it. So for me, that like really helped me to think of it that way. What's the saying? Like you can't edit a blank page.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good one.
So, I mean, like you need to have something on there and then like you're saying, you can shift it around, but it at least gives
Yeah.
you a focus to work with.
Yeah. I mean, your plan changes specifically with time for your season of life, right? My plan right now with kids is going to look a lot different in the summer because they're not in school, right? So things are flexible and that's okay. They don't need to be perfect all of the time. Also, I just want to sneak this in because this just triggered something is triggers, right? So a lot of people will say like, "Oh, I had a hiccup," or "Oh, I don't want to do this," or like I'm going to push this back, or things will come up. And so there's triggers that we have to deal with, whether that's internal triggers, which is perfectionism, or outside triggers. So that's the doorbell rings, that's my phone's not on do not disturb, those kinds of things. So as you are going through your day and you're kind of learning how you like to spend your time, also think about that when things come up. Like if you pull up something to do and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to do this right now," kind of ask yourself, like, why am I avoiding this? Why don't I want to do this? You can start asking yourself questions when you start checking in, like what's actually going on, because it's never about time. It's the same for everybody. It's always like, what are those triggers happening to?
That is a really good point. Yeah, because I definitely notice like some of my stuff is like distractions or procrastination. And
Yeah.
so like I have tried to get a little bit more curious over the last few months of like, all right, why am I avoiding this thing?
But that's good because that's your brain trying to keep you safe. That's what
Yeah,
your
exactly.
brain knows is normal. But then also checking in and saying like, something's going on here is how you fix that long term.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I'm glad that you said that first because what was coming to mind with this specific example is that like, I didn't want to disappoint a client. Well, if I never get the thing done, that's going to be more disappointing than turning something in that they want to modify or tweak a little bit. So it's like, okay, just do the thing and get it to them
Totally.
and then say, open for feedback. What do you think? Like, what changes might you want to make?
Oh, I love that you said that. I think that'll resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, I hope so. Cause it definitely helps me. There were like a couple of projects where I was like, ugh, and I would stare at it for a couple of weeks and I'm like, all right, pull up your big girl panties and like get the show on the road.
I love that you said that.
Yeah. So another thing for me that I'm hoping and I think will resonate with a lot of other people listening is that I have this thing with control where, I don't know, maybe it's got to do with the perfectionist thing, but I really resisted for a very long time of like letting anyone help me personally or professionally.
Hmm.
And we could totally go down like more of a therapy lens for this, but we won't.
Yeah.
But like I always needed to be there for everybody else, but like I couldn't ask for support. Why? Go figure. But now I finally did go through the route of like, okay, doing some things to figure out that I did want support and then finding that support. So I'm keeping that
Yeah.
high level because I would love to know like, what are some things that if someone is looking into hiring a VA for support or something like that, like keeping it through the professional lens, like what would we maybe need to do to prepare for that?
Yeah. So we won't veer into the mindset stuff, although it's a huge, huge part of it.
It is, I can tell you.
Yeah, do that work. It's really important. There's nothing that like opens up mindset stuff that comes in besides being a business owner and being a mom. Those are like the two things that'll change
Yeah.
like how you've thought about everything. But more tangible things like what can I actually do? So I think I'm ready to hire a virtual assistant or start hiring somebody for support. The very first question they always ask me is, what do I outsource? To your point of like, the control and getting over that kind of stuff, like what do I even give to somebody? So a lot of people get really, really bad advice online and they just outsource what they hate. I'm sure you've seen like
Oh,
people
yeah.
that are like, oh, if you hate doing that, just hire somebody else to do it. It's terrible advice. Okay. And I'm going to tell you why. It is terrible advice because a lot of times when you hate it, you shouldn't even be doing it anyway. And what happens, I call it the resentment cycle, is that they will hire for the thing that they hate doing. They will spend money to get that thing done, but then they will feel guilty about spending the money that they actually could be doing it, right? Like, have you ever thought of like, I'm going to outsource that. And then you're like, oh, I could do that. And now I'm spending more money like, I'll just let them go and I'll do it myself. And then you get back into the cycle, right? So what you actually want to do is hire somebody to help you create revenue that you are already creating. So if that is a consultant, if that's a coach, service provider, that's typically going to be somebody that helps you managing your current clients. Like that is typically 9 out of 10 times I say that. Please, for all that is holy, do not hire a social media manager as your first hire if you are not making money on social media. That's the mistake I see a lot, is that people are like, oh, I want to do that, and so I'll hire to help you create more revenue. Why? Because then when you free up your time to create more revenue, you already are still making that same revenue. So you truly are getting an ROI for your investment almost immediately.
I totally follow.
Okay. Want to make sure that like people that are listening truly understand that if you hire a virtual assistant that will help you manage your clients, so inbox management, scheduling, literally onboarding, offboarding, whatever that looks like, so that you can start doing more sales calls to bring in more clients, that is going to be the best ROI for hiring a virtual assistant. That's obviously for consultants, coaches, service providers. You listening should think in your business, how do you generate revenue with clients? What brings in the most money to your business? And hire somebody to help take that over so that you can free yourself up to start creating more revenue. That's number one, what to outsource.
In my head, I'm like remembering what I've done. So I did actually have someone come in to help manage my inbox. And then I realized that I really liked that and that I needed to respond to a lot of the messages anyway. And so I was like, all right, let me take this back and let me think about it. And I think it was probably like a year and a half between having that person in and then having this other person come in. And when I brought the second person in, which was like very, very recent. So like we're still like figuring stuff out, but like she knows me, I know her. That was another part of the thing. There was already like the rapport and the friendship there.
The trust there, yeah.
And just like I can see her brain works, and she also like wants to understand how my brain works. So I feel like I got like the jackpot of all support people. But when we had that initial call, she literally asked me like, okay, what's the thing that's bringing in the most money? So I feel like she was like, yeah, she must have read your playbook or something, because that's how we decided to make decisions and prioritize things, even from the laundry list that I gave her. So we're looking much more at like holistically. Like I knew for me, systems was a big thing and workflows, and I have decent ones, but how can I automate some things? How can I hand some stuff off to her so that she can be the touch point for that thing? You know, what do I need to add in? What are some things I can clean up and streamline? And so I feel like I was much more prepared for this person coming in than I was for the first one. The first one, I was like, oh, I'm seeing everybody else hiring people. Maybe I should do that.
Well, that's what I did. That's why I learned all of this and now teach it, right? Because it's like you do the first one and you're like, oh man, that didn't work out like I hoped it would. And then you learn. So in that case, it's more about freeing you up to make money, but also saving money because you're implementing systems and automations and all of that. So there again is an ROI of like, oh, okay, I'm saving some money here. So that's what I would say is when you're looking at what to outsource, think about financially what will make sense for an ROI immediately instead of outsourcing something that has no revenue and you're just taking a loss on it from the beginning, because that will just, like I said, resentment cycle.
Yeah.
And maybe you did this after your first one, but the next thing that I say people can do like right now is once they figure out, okay, I want to outsource this to a virtual assistant in a month, in 2 months, in 6 months, is to start documenting processes, right? How do you do the things that you do? That's really all that it is. You hear people say SOP and standard operating procedures and people get all nervous and they're like, that sounds scary. It really just means documenting what you do, right? So if you're going to outsource your inbox management, turn on Loom and record yourself going through your inbox. This is how I do this. This is how I categorize, right? Like you're starting to create a training library really of videos that when you hire somebody, they can go through that. And then it helps when you're onboarding, they can actually visually see, or maybe you use like Scribe is a great one where it actually will write out an SOP for you, but just start documenting processes that you do each day. So there's no extra time, right? You're doing them already anyway.
Yeah.
And you will be much more thankful to have that when you're onboarding, because people will have resources to go to before you get bogged down of how do you do this? And, you know, all the questions that come when you hire somebody, which are not bad, but also we want to give them as many tools as we possibly can.
I really love that, to just do like the over the shoulder, like, here's what I'm doing. That has also been a very challenging thing for me because they live in my head, which I'm sure is like totally common, but it's like, it lives in my head and then it's like, what do I actually do? What are the steps here?
Yeah. So next time you do it, just literally turn on Loom and say, I'm about to onboard a client and this is what I do. I open my contract and I do this and I update this and I send it and then I come up, right? Like just as you're
Mhm.
doing it. And then you can start filing these videos into like onboarding a client. And it's just so much easier when you do those things every day instead of, okay, now I hired for help. She's starting in a week. Crap, what do I teach her or him, right? Like
Yeah.
you avoid
Yeah.
that because you're like, oh, I already have that. So it's just like taking a big project and breaking it down into what you already do.
That is so smart. Okay, so that's what we can do once we have the person. How do we get the person?
Yes, that's a good question. So it's really as easy as once you figure out what you want to outsource, that's the number one thing, then you can create a job description. And that also does not need to sound as scary as it sounds. You literally can just put what you need, what they do, right? I actually might have one in my free community, like just a typical template job description. But what are they going to be doing for you? Are there any tools that they need to know or that you use? Just like the typical things that, you can Google job description and it'll show you exactly what should be on it, right? And just fill that out based on what you do and like what you might want them to do in 3 months. You can always think about that too. And have all those things on there. And then you can disperse it to different places, right? There's Facebook groups that are meant for virtual assistants that they love to post those. If you have somebody or know somebody, like a referral is always going to be the best thing to do, right? Because you know that person. And when you start feeling uneasy about bringing somebody into your business, typically that's because there's no trust there. And so that helps kind of bridge that gap,
Mhm.
like you mentioned before. And one hot tip I will give is that when you are at that process of posting the job description in Facebook groups and an email, wherever you're sending it out, I say send it out to wherever,
Yeah.
do a Google form, and that's how people will apply. So create a Google form of your application. Do not put email support at your company, your application, because there's so many people that do that and they will get inundated, like hundreds of applications, and there's no way to compare the applicants. So use just a simple Google form. I usually write like a job description in a Google Doc and at the very bottom, apply here, and it's just a Google form link. They go right there because then when you turn off the applications, you say you leave it open for 2 weeks, you can just close it on the back end. You're not getting inundated. That is my hot tip advice when you actually are at the point of wanting to take applications for people.
That is very, very wise because I definitely heard from friends who were like, I posted this thing and I got, like you said, hundreds of responses. And then, you thought you had a problem managing your inbox. Now you legitimately have a big problem managing your inbox.
Because once you're done with the Google form and you turn it off, you can just pull all that information and look pretty quickly. Like if you said you wanted somebody in the US, anybody that isn't in the US, you can just delete out, right? Like that is so much easier than, going email by email. That gives me hives.
Oh, yeah. That just like makes my body not happy. Like, no.
Yeah, no, make it easy on yourself.
What are some other maybe like red flags or just like pieces of advice that you end up sharing with people? I'm thinking like of the entire thing, like finding someone
Oh, yeah.
or figuring out what to delegate. Like, what are some things that come up even as I say that?
So a big thing that I see people don't do is hire with your values up first.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge, huge one, especially if you want to keep the VA longevity, right? Because, like if you grow and scale, because the idea is a VA comes in and helps you scale, and then maybe they could be your director of operations one day, right? So there's room for growth. And if you want somebody to be with you for a very long time, you have to have your values first and foremost. So if you do not have values, everybody has values, but you might not immediately say, like, these are my values,
Mhm.
right? My values are family and fun. If I don't have that, it's like I'm not me, right? So those are the values that I carry in business and in life. And so every decision, that's your guidepost in your business, right? I'm not going to hire somebody that's a stick in the mud, personality wise, right? Because, right, like
Yep.
I like to have the fun experience. So think about things that are you values wise and put them on the job description. Like I will say, this is the business, this is what we do, our values are, because then people will start weeding themselves out as well. If they're like, oh, that's not so much me. I always use the example of if you really value responsiveness, if it's communication, you're probably not going to hire a virtual assistant that has a 9 to 5 because that person is not going to be available when you are working, right? So things like that you can kind of think about long term is like, no matter the relationship, if your values aren't aligned, then it's not going to work out. So that would be like a hot tip. People don't talk about that a lot.
They really don't. And that was something that I did last year, I think, when I updated my website, or the year before. I don't know. I can't remember. I've lost track of like time and years and months and all of that.
Totally, yeah.
But I ended up putting my values on my about page. For me, it's very easy to pull out whether there's a speaking gig that comes up and I need to submit that, or doing something like this. If I were to have created a job description and then post the values, it's like, oh yeah, for anyone listening, it really does make a huge difference to take the time to think about that and write those down.
Yeah. And if you haven't done it, you can just Google Brene Brown's list of values and it'll have like 100 that comes up. And you just go through and you mark them off until you get down to your last couple. Like I just say 2 or 3. And so it's just like those things are everything that this client is coming. Does this align with the business values, right? You just get into the habit of thinking as a core person, this is what I believe. Does it align? And it just is so much easier when you know those.
Yeah, it does make it a lot more helpful. It's another filter that we get to filter things with. Are there any other red flags or pieces of advice or hot tips that it's like, oh, this would be?
So I have hired many, many, many virtual assistants for myself and for clients because I used to run a virtual assistant agency. So I know a thing or two about it. And what I will say is that you can teach people tools and softwares all day long. Personality, those non-tangible things. How do they speak? Like those things are gold. So just keep that in mind, is that I typically hire off of personality things, how they think. Like that to me is so much more important than can they use Dubsado, because those things can be taught. So I actually put on my job descriptions, the tools that I use at the very bottom, because I can teach you how to use tools. I have these videos, right? So keep that in the mind too. That's not a red flag, though, that I would say is if people can't follow how you tell them to do a job description. That's an immediate no for me, because like if you say, don't DM me, just apply right here, and they DM me, it's an automatic. I don't even read the DM. I appreciate the hustle, but that's completely opposite of what I asked for. So that would be a red flag for me. It's like you're automatically out.
Yeah, totally. I worked at a couple of chiropractic offices when I was a massage therapist, so like back in my previous life.
Yeah.
And that was like the number one thing. If they couldn't follow the instructions, it's like, okay, we can't.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah. Or you're just applying to any of them. Yeah. You could do like a secret word in there that really shows people are paying attention. So there's these little tricks and stuff that you can do. But I would say those are kind of the big things to do or don't do.
Those are really helpful things, and some that I had thought about, but a lot of which I really hadn't. So I'm sure anyone listening is going to be like just blown away. So I know you have your free community, but tell us all the things. Where can we connect with you? What can we come get from you? How can we work with you?
Yeah. So the school community is going to be where I hang out for a majority of time. And that's where all the goodies are. So the freebies, I have master classes in there that aren't available to the public. As you know, there's just tons of good things in there that I would say go there first. And then also on Instagram is where I'm most active. So if you find me on social media, it's going to be on Instagram. It's just at Time Freedom Co. with a little underscore. DM me questions. Don't be afraid to DM me and say help, ask questions and all that stuff. So
awesome. This is so great. Yeah. And definitely don't be shy about messaging her, because that's how we ended up here today.
Yes, please do. I love, instead of just lurking, come say hi. I want to meet you.
Well, this has been great. And thank you so much again for carving out the time and sharing all of your knowledge with us.
Of course. Thanks for having me. And I'll make sure to get everything over to you so that you can pass it off, all the good stuff.
Yeah, we'll have all of the links and things below. So I'll catch you guys next time. Hey, fellow podcaster. I see you out here wanting to do more with SEO, but not even knowing where to begin or what to do. Oh, and yeah, there are loads of episodes you should be blogging about, but how? I saw so many conversations just like this happening around me, and one day I just thought, I'm a podcaster. I'm an SEO show notes writer. I should make a resource. So I did. And now you can grab the SEO podcast show note and blog post templates. You get everything you need to go from podcast idea to SEO optimized podcast show note to SEOified blog post, which means you've got 2 long-form content pieces out here marketing for you 24/7. I even included video training so you know exactly what goes where and how to incorporate SEO for your podcast ASAP. Click the link in the show notes and grab your templates today.